Have you ever read a book and just felt like it was speaking directly to, like, the way your brain
I
works?
what do you mean?
Like it's putting into words those feelings you never even realized you had.
Yeah, like you're seeing a reflection of your own experiences on the page.
Exactly. And that's what it was like for me diving into, well, to be honest, more like tumbling headfirst into Fragile Replacements by William Allegrezza.
It's not your typical poetry collection, that's for sure.
No, not at all. This is experimental poetry, like really experimental, which I'll admit I wasn't sure what to expect going in,
It
but
can be a bit daunting at first.
it was. But once I started piecing things together,
Yeah.
I mean, whoa.
Like discovering a whole new way of looking at language.
Jet at life, honestly.
Yeah.
Like the title itself, Fragile Replacements, it just makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
Huh. Yeah, it definitely sets the tone for the kind of exploration he's undertaking.
Right. So let's maybe start with like a roadmap for our listeners, give them a sense of what we're dealing with here.
Sure, so we have excerpts from Fragile Replacements, and we're going to be diving into how Allegrezza uses this fragmented style.
Yeah. The fragmentation, that's a huge part of it.
It really is. He plays with form, structure, even just the way words are arranged on the page.
Like I was looking at the table of contents, right? And you have these titles like Go Between, Gathering Forces. It's like even before you start reading, you get this sense that things aren't exactly straightforward.
Yeah, and that's deliberate. He's reflecting the fragmented nature of memory, of experience itself. It's like life doesn't come with a neat little outline, and neither do our memories.
And you know what's crazy? I noticed this section called Go Between, right?
Mm-hmm.
And each part, it like lines up with a section from Dante's Vita Nuova, that epic poem about love and loss.
It's an interesting parallel, and it really highlights how Allegrezza is engaging with these timeless themes, these universal experiences.
It's like he's having a conversation with Dante across centuries.
Oh.
And speaking of connections, one thing that really struck me reading through these poems is this pervasive sense of longing, of lost love. It's like a thread woven through the entire collection.
Absolutely. There's a rawness and emotional honesty to the way he writes about these themes, even within this fragmented structure. Like, it's not just abstract concepts. He's grappling with real, deeply felt experiences.
Yeah, and he does it in a way that just pulls you in. Like that line from Go Between XV, I am explaining what happened so that I might rise up, but division hampers me.
It's so powerful the way he captures that struggle to make sense of the past, to find meaning in the fragments.
Right. And it's interesting, there's this recurring you that pops up a lot in these poems. It's like, who is this you? A past lover, the reader, Allegrezza himself.
That ambiguity is really interesting. He's bringing the reader into that space of uncertainty, of questioning, and making us active participants in the search for meaning.
Okay, so could we talk about how he uses language? Because that's another thing that blew me away with this collection. It's like he's not afraid to break all the rules.
Experimental poetry is all about pushing boundaries, challenging our expectations of what a poem can be.
Yeah, and he definitely does that. Like there's this poem called Tables, and it's literally just the word tables repeated over and over again.
It might seem simple on the surface, but that repetition actually forces us to confront language in a new way. What happens when a word is stripped of its usual context? What meaning can we find in the mundane?
And then there's XXX. I
Mhm.
mean, seriously, it's a page with just XXX printed on it. What do you even do with that?
That one definitely makes a statement, doesn't it? It's like he's daring us to find meaning, to look beyond the surface.
It's provocative, that's for sure. And you know what? I kind of love that he's making me think, making me work for it.
That's what's so exciting about Allegrezza's work. It's not about being handed neat interpretations. It's about embracing the ambiguity, the complexity of language and experience.
And maybe even finding some beauty in those unexpected places. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're back, still swimming in this sea of fragments that is William Allegrezza's Fragile Replacements.
And I think one of the things that struck me about this collection is how it really makes the reader work, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Like you're not just passively consuming these poems, you're actively constructing meaning from them.
Yeah, like you're piecing together a puzzle, but the picture keeps changing as you go.
Yes. And sometimes those missing pieces, those gaps, they're just as important as the pieces you do have, right?
Right? It's in those spaces, those silences, where we as readers can bring our own experiences and interpretations to the work.
That really resonates with me. And it's like, even the way he uses punctuation or lack thereof, it all adds to this feeling of like searching, grasping for something just out of reach.
Absolutely. It's like he's mirroring the way memory itself works, fragmented, incomplete, but still so powerful.
Yeah, and Just when you think you're starting to get a handle on things, he throws in a line like, bitterness halts definition, so that now an argument for oneness seems hopelessly misguided. And it's like, whoa, okay, back to square one.
Right. And that line comes from Go Between XX, which is such a pivotal section in the collection, because it really highlights this tension between connection and disconnection that he's constantly grappling with.
It's like he's both yearning for that connection, that oneness, but also acknowledging the ways in which we're all ultimately fragmented,
Yeah.
separate.
Exactly. And he doesn't shy away from those difficult emotions, those moments of bitterness and disillusionment.
And what's interesting is how he often uses this direct address, like he's speaking directly to the reader, which can be a little, well,
Unnerving.
yeah, a little. Like he's inviting you into this very intimate space, but then also reminding you that you're just an observer, you know?
I see what you mean. It's like he's breaking down the barrier between the poet and the reader, but then also highlighting the inherent distance that exists between any two individuals.
Okay, so can we talk about tables for a second?
Sure.
Because that poem, it's just the word tables over and over again. I mean, what's going on there?
Well, for me, it speaks to the power of repetition, of how even a simple word can take on new meaning when it's repeated, decontextualized.
Like it almost becomes this mantra, this meditation on the word itself.
And remember, this poem is dedicated to Ray Bianchi, another experimental poet.
Yeah.
So there's also this subtle nod to their shared artistic lineage, a conversation happening between poets across different works.
Oh, wow. I didn't even pick up on that. See, this is what I love about these deep dives. There's always something new to discover.
And sometimes those discoveries come from the most unexpected places, like XXX. That poem still has me scratching my head.
I mean, what do you even say about a poem that's just XXX?
Well, for me, it's a bold statement about the power of symbolism, about how even a single image, a single arrangement of letters, can evoke such a visceral response.
It's definitely provocative, that's for sure. And you know what? I think that's part of what I appreciate about Allegra's work overall. He's not afraid to challenge our expectations, to make us uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And that's where the real reward lies, I think. When we're willing to lean into that discomfort, to embrace the ambiguity, that's when we can really start to uncover new meanings, new ways of seeing the world.
Speaking of uncovering new meanings, can we talk about gathering forces? Because that poem felt, I don't know, like a culmination of everything we've been discussing so far.
It's a powerful piece, that's for sure. And that title, Gathering Forces, it's so apt because throughout the collection, we've seen Allegrezza gathering these fragments, these disparate elements, and in this poem, it's like he's unleashing them, creating this space where they can collide and coalesce.
And then he hits us with those final lines. We're not asking, but giving fragmented bits of a world. I mean, talk about a mic drop moment.
Right. It's like he's reframing the entire reading experience. He's not dictating meaning, but offering these fragments as raw material for us to shape and interpret.
Like he's saying, here, take these pieces, these broken bits of language and experience, and make something new with them.
Exactly. It's a call to action, in a way. A challenge to embrace the fragmented nature of our world, of ourselves, and to find beauty and meaning in the unexpected.
And you know what? That's a challenge I'm willing to accept.
Shh.
Okay, so we're back. And I have to say, I'm still processing everything we've talked about, you know? This whole idea of fragmentation, the way Allegrezza uses language, it's really something else.
It really gets under your skin, doesn't it? Makes you look at things a little differently.
Totally. Like even the way I'm seeing the world around me right now, it feels a bit more, I don't know, fragmented. Like I'm more aware of the gaps, the spaces between things.
That's fascinating. And it makes me think about something we talked about earlier, about how Allegrezza wants to be understood through a heavy veil of obscurity.
Right. Like, come on, man, just give us a straight answer.
But then, would it be as impactful?
Yeah.
You know, I think there's something about having to work for those meanings, having to piece things together ourselves, that makes it all the more rewarding.
Okay, that's a good point. Like, the harder you have to work for something, the more you appreciate it when you finally get there.
Exactly. It's like finding a hidden gem or solving a really challenging puzzle. That sense of accomplishment is part of the experience.
I like that. And you know what? This whole conversation has actually inspired me to, well, experiment a little myself.
Oh, how so?
Well, we've been talking about reading Allegrezza, but what if we took it a step further and actually listened to his words?
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Because poetry, at its core, is meant to be heard, isn't it?
Exactly. So I'm thinking, next time I pick up Fragile Replacements, I'm going to read those words out loud. Pay attention to the rhythm, the pauses, the way they feel in my mouth.
That's fantastic. And maybe even experiment with different ways of reading it. Because sometimes meaning isn't just found in what's being said, but in how it's being said.
Right. Like even the silences, the repetitions, it all adds up to something more.
It's like Allegretza says in Gathering Forces, a word becomes a way through language. Each word, each fragment is a stepping stone on this journey of discovery.
This whole deep dive has been a journey, that's for sure. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I hope our listeners feel the same way.
Me too. And I think that's a good place to leave it for today. But before we go, we want to encourage all of you out there to, well, keep diving deep. Keep exploring those hidden corners of literature, of art, of life itself. You never know what treasures you might find.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, happy reading. Or should I say, happy listening.